Hello everyone, I'm Stephanie Beckler with the National Renewable Energy Laboratory and welcome to today's webinar, which is hosted by the Clean Energy Solutions Center in partnership with International Smart Grid Action Network. Today's webinar is focused on the research and innovation needs for smart grid transition. Before we begin, I'll quickly go over some of the webinar's features. For audio, you have two options. You can either listen through your computer or over the telephone. If you choose to listen through the computer, please select the mic and speakers option in the audio pane. If you choose to dial in by phone, please select the telephone option, and a box on the right-hand side will display the telephone number and audio pin you should use to dial in. If anyone is having difficulty with the webinar, you can contact the GoToWebinars help desk at 888-259-3826 for assistance. The number is also on the screen. If you'd like to ask a question during the webinar, and we encourage that you do, please use the questions pane in the webinar toolbar. If you're having difficulty viewing any of the materials through the webinar portal, you'll find PDF copies of the presentations at cleanenergysolutions.org/training, and you can follow along as the speakers present. Also, the audio recording and presentations will be posted to the Solutions Center training page within a few days of the broadcast and will be added to the Solutions Center YouTube channel, where you will find other informative webinars as well as video interviews with thought leaders on clean energy policy topics. One important note of mention before we begin our presentations is that the Clean Energy Solutions Center does not endorse or recommend specific products or services. Information provided in this webinar is featured in the Solutions Center's resource library as one of many best practices, resources reviewed and selected by technical experts. Today's webinar is centered around presentations from our guest panelists, Eric Perano and Klaus Kubeczko, who have joined us to discuss good practice cases of how to identify research and innovation needs for the transition towards future smart grids. Before we jump into the presentations, I'll provide a quick overview of the Clean Energy Solutions Center, and then following the presentations, we'll have a question and answer session where the panelists will address questions submitted by the audience. At the end of the webinar, you'll automatically be prompted to fill out a brief survey as well, so we thank you in advance for taking a moment to respond. The Solutions Center was launched in 2011 under the Clean Energy Ministerial. The Clean Energy Ministerial is a high-level global forum to promote policies and programs that advance clean energy technology, to share lessons learned and best practices, and to encourage the transition to a global clean energy economy. 24 countries and the European Commission are members, covering 90% of clean energy investment and 75% of the global greenhouse gas emissions. This webinar is provided by the Clean Energy Solutions Center, which focuses on helping government policymakers design and adopt policies and programs that support the development of clean energy technologies. This is accomplished through support in crafting and implementing policies relating to energy access, no-cost expert policy assistance, and peer-to-peer learning and training tools, such as this webinar. The Clean Energy Solutions Center is co-sponsored by the governments of Australia, Sweden, the United States, with in-kind support from the government of Mexico. The Solutions Center provides several clean energy policies and programs. Next slide, please. These policies and programs include a team of over 60 global experts that can provide remote and in-person technical assistance to governments and government-supported institutions, no-cost virtual webinar trainings on a variety of clean energy policy topics, partnership building and development agencies and regional and global organizations to deliver support, an online library containing over 5,500 clean energy policy-related publications, tools, videos, and other resources. Our primary audience is made up of energy policymakers and analysts from governments and technical organizations in all countries, but we also strive to engage with the private sector, NGOs, and civil society. The Solutions Center is an international initiative that works with more than 35 international partners across a suite of different programs. Several of the partners are listed above and include research organizations like IRENA and the IEA, programs like SE4All, and regionally focused entities such as ECOWAS Center for Renewable Energy and Energy Efficiency. A marquee feature that the Solutions Center provides is no-cost expert policy assistance, known as Ask an Expert. The Ask an Expert service matches policymakers with one or of the more than 50 global experts selected as authoritative leaders on a variety of clean energy finance and policy topics. For example, in the area of grid integration or off-grid solutions, we are pleased to have Hugo Lucas from Factor CO2 serving as one of our experts. If you have a need for policy assistance in any clean energy sector, we encourage you to use this valuable service. Again, the assistance is provided free of charge, and if you have any questions for our experts, please submit it through our simple online form at cleanenergysolutions.org/training. We also invite you to spread the word about this service to those in your networks and organizations. Now I'd like to provide brief introductions for today's panelists. First up is Klaus Kubeczko, who is a Senior Expert Advisor and Scientist at the Center for Innovation Systems and Policy at the Austrian Institute of Technology. He has an industry background as an electrical engineer and holds a PhD in socio-economics. Following Klaus, we'll hear from Eric Pirano, who is Executive Vice President at Technofi, where he currently develops a commercial offer in the fields of low-carbon electricity, smart buildings and cities, and eco-manufacturing. And with those quick introductions, I would like to welcome Klaus to the webinar.
Yeah, thanks, Emily and Stephanie. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all of you. First of all, thank you to the Clean Energy Solutions Center for the possibility to hold this webinar. And before starting with the two presentations, let me briefly inform you about the ISCAN Annex 7 activities, what it is, what it does, and how this webinar is part of the Annex 7 activities. Annex 7 is part of ISCAN, and ISCAN was launched as the International Smart Grid Action Network at the first Clean Energy Ministerial. Its participants report periodically on progress and projects to the ministers of the Clean Energy Ministerial. It is organized as one of the technology collaboration programs of the International Energy Agency and creates a mechanism to advance the deployment of smart electric grids, technologies, practices and systems. Systems meaning here the physical grid as well as the system of incumbent and new actors, emerging actors, markets, and of those institutions which provide the framework for an intelligent energy system. ISCAN facilitates dynamic knowledge sharing, technical assistance and project coordination. ISCAN Annex 7 is a working group within ISCAN which deals with the transition from centralized systems of energy with external energy supply towards decentralized systems with internal energy supply. So coming from hierarchical systems towards decentralized systems and local grid solutions. The main objective of this annex is to investigate institutional issues in the widest sense associated with smart grid deployment. Annex 7 aims at sparking off an international coordinated transdisciplinary research activity in the social sciences, supporting and complementing technology-oriented smart grid activities. Further aims and scopes are to establish an inter- and transdisciplinary network of social science, humanities, researchers and practitioners to support policy development in the field of research, technology and innovation. And last but not least, to bring up-to-date knowledge to the attention of the Clean Energy Ministerial and Mission Innovation. The focus of Annex 7 lies on shaping the local grids, taking into account, most importantly, the socio-economic complexity of energy systems and the links between technological and social components of energy system. Second, institutional change and orchestration processes, coordination processes related to smart grid development and the transformation towards new energy systems. And third, the focus is on strategic long-term thinking in alternative transformative pathways. Not for everybody it might be clear what the term social science humanities, SSH, means. Social science and humanities covers basically all research disciplines which are not part of natural science or engineering. It includes social science, economics, psychology, political science, history, as well as marketing and law. For the League of European Research Universities, Sir Llewellyn Smith from Oxford University and colleagues from European Research Universities have outlined the essential SSH research for secure, clean and efficient energy in a position paper. In Europe, this is relevant as this is one of the societal challenges for which Horizon 2020, the European Research Programme, is providing substantial research funding. Let me cite from this paper to explain also what are the rationales and motivations for research in SSH to work on energy issues. And it brings me also to the reason of this webinar. Meeting the world's future energy needs in an environmentally responsible but affordable manner is an enormous technical challenge. However, devising the policies, institutions, legislation and economic tools that will enable this to be done in an effective and politically, socially, culturally and ethically acceptable manner is at least as great, if not a great challenge. Research in social sciences and humanities is essential to probe these deeper issues and develop the tools for tackling them. So the reason for this webinar is to highlight the importance of social science humanities research for energy transition. Today's webinar is part of the process toward an Annex 7 white paper on a strategic research agenda for smart grid transition. The aim of the white paper will be to promote social science humanities and socio-economic research and bring it to the attention of the Clean Energy Ministerial at the annual CEMS, Clean Energy Ministerial Conferences, as well as to the attention of Mission Innovation, the rather new initiative of 22 countries with the aim to double investment on clean energy R&D within 5 years. The steps in formulating this SRA so far have been screening of foresight, survey with national policymakers of ISGAN, an ISGAN workshop in Shanghai dealing with these topics and the results of the survey. The Austrian SRA process, which I'm presenting later on, is also part of this activities and provides valuable inputs to this white paper. Annex 7 workshop has been taken place at the Austrian Smart Grid Week in 2016, an international workshop also discussing a broader range of international and national strategic research agendas, including, for example, from the Netherlands. Yeah, and finally, now with this webinar, we want to discuss with you as stakeholders from different world regions two of the processes of strategic research agenda development. The first, which was coordinated by Eric Perronneau, who will present a European roadmap on research and innovation needs regarding smart grid and the integration of energy storage. And the second process, an Austrian strategy coordinated by AIT, will be presented by me. It was a national strategy process which dealt with an intelligent and integrated energy system. Okay, before the floor is given to Eric, I'd like to inform you of the possibility to join the Annex 7 LinkedIn discussion group on smart grid transition. If you want to join, please send me an email. The discussion group will be the platform to further discuss the issues of the white paper in its draft version as well as its final version. Okay, and now let me give the floor to Eric for the first presentation of an SRA.
Thank you, Klaus. So good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone. And I would like to thank also, as Klaus, the Clean Energy Solutions Center for giving me the opportunity to present this European roadmap for smart grids and integration of energy storage. First, a short introduction before we go into the content of the presentation. So this roadmap is a 10-year roadmap covering the next decade. So when we say it's a 10-year roadmap, we mean that it is the list of research and innovation activities which must be launched in the decade to come so as to reach the ambitious targets set by the European Union, European Commission, for its energy policies. So this roadmap was written in the framework of a project. This is the Grid Plus Storage project. It's the logo that you see at the left bottom corner of the slide. It was a service contract, consultancy contract for the EC. The partners were Technofi, my company, which is a consultancy company specialized, among others, in the energy field, is the European Association for Storage of Energy. So this association gathers manufacturers, but also major energy players in Europe. EDSO, which is the European Association for Distribution System Operators. So it is the companies, the regulated companies in Europe operating the distribution grids. And SOE, which is the European Association for TSOs, Transmission System Operators, so gathering companies operating the transmission networks in European countries. RSC, which is a national research center in Italy in electrical engineering, and VITO, which is also a consultancy company with competencies in the energy field. So this roadmap is very broad. It covers many technologies, technical issues, but it also covers socio-economic issues. So that's what we are going to focus on today. And we will focus at the distribution level, meaning that we will address only R&I activities relative to distribution grids. So we will explain why. Let's look at the content. So first, I would like to spend some time to explain the European policy framework because it has a strong implication for this roadmap. Then I will go through the stakeholder landscape. I will explain why the ETIPSnet is. Then I will quickly go through the process. So that's the next 3 points to explain the new structure of the roadmap, the structure of this roadmap. And then we'll spend some time on the socio-economic R&I activities. So I will explain what are the major challenges in terms of socio-economic research and innovation activities for distribution grids in Europe. So let's start with the EU policy framework. There are 3 main drivers for the energy policies in Europe. The first one is to reduce greenhouse gas emissions to decarbonize the European economy. So I would say this one is really the main driver. The second one is the security of supply. So this is mainly related to natural gas supply in Europe. And the third one is economic growth, which speaks for itself. Important point, in Europe we have 27 countries after the Brexit. Each country has a different energy system. For example, if we think about distribution grids, in France, there is only, I would say, one company operating almost all distribution grids, so 90% of the end users of France. It's called Enedis. Whereas in Austria, in the country of Klaus, there are over 100 companies operating local distribution grids. So this has strong implications in terms of energy policies. What about the regulatory framework at European level? So it is defined by what is called energy packages, and these energy packages, they contain directives and regulations. So regulation is something that is put forward by the European Parliament and which is mandatory. All the member states, the European countries, members of the European Union have to adopt this text, whereas directives are text which have to be adopted, which have to be enacted at the parliaments of the different countries, but with a time delay. So there were several packages during the two last decades in Europe which shaped and defined the European policies. So the first directive in the 90s was about the unbundling of the energy sector. So historically the energy companies in Europe, they were vertically integrated. They were dealing with production, transport, distribution, and retail. So this first directive was to unbundle these companies, so as to have separated competencies. Second set of directive in the early 2000s was about the promotion of renewables. So I would say this is the main driver for our roadmap today, the promotion of renewables, especially the high share of renewable electricity in electricity grids, which challenges the people operating these grids. Third set of directive was about the internal market in electricity and gas. So in Europe, the European Commission tries to have a system where energy is traded without borders so as to foster competition. And more recently, so we had a major recast of these existing directives and regulations so as to speed up, I would say, the three directives which were put forward during the last 2 decades. So we'll go back to this last package, which is called the Clean Energy for European package. So these directives have deeply changed the energy system. So as I said, now there are new market players with clear competencies, so generators, traders, retailers, service providers, and so on. They are regulated market makers, so it is regulated companies, so it is the system operators for transmission and distribution, and there are national regulatory authorities in each member state, so which check the activities of the regulated players, and there is a European regulator, ACER. We have an integrated European energy markets, so we are trying to make sure that electricity is traded without borders. This is already the case today with wholesale market, with what we call the market coupling. So all spot markets in Europe are coupled. So all these changes create intensive research and innovation needs for the power system. So due mainly to the organization solutions that have to be put forward to operate the electricity grids within the stability limits, of course, and at affordable costs. What about the roadmaps of the European Commissions? So the European Commission in 2008 published a broad roadmap, so addressing all energy topics, all energy technologies, so as to meet the 2020 targets that you see here. So reduction in greenhouse gases emissions, penetration of renewables, and energy efficiency. In 2014, this roadmap was renewed. It was an integrated roadmap where the European Commission went from individual technologies to the energy system, meaning to a system approach, with new targets for 2030. So that's the targets that you see here. And finally, so very important point, in 2015, the member states agreed on a common energy policies in Europe with 5 main points. So the first point, energy security, we spoke about it. It's about the natural gas supply, about in an integrated energy market, energy efficiency, so the moderation of demand, transition to a low carbon society, and research, innovation, and competitiveness. So that's where we are, our roadmap today in terms of policies. So if we look at this integrated set plan, so the strategic energy technology plan and with its integrated roadmap, which was published in 2014, you see that there are 10 key actions. So we are in key action 4, resilience and security of energy system. So this large integrated roadmap is supplemented with specific roadmap in each of these topics. So we are here at key action 4, and there are other actions which are also relevant. So the renewable energy technologies, the service for consumers, and e-mobility, meaning batteries that could provide, for example, vehicle-to-grid applications. So now let's go quickly to the ETIPSnet. So I would like to give you just some info about the landscape of this European road mapping exercise for smart grids. So we started from an existing roadmap, which was dealing with the integration of renewables. So it was published in 2013, covering a decade up to 2022. It was put forward by what was called the EEGI, the European Electricity Grid Initiative, meaning an association gathering all stakeholders of the power system, so mainly research institutes and companies. This roadmap was supplemented every year by implementation plans. So implementation plans are publications, recommendations for the European Commission every year to draft their call for proposals in the H2020, for example, Horizon 2020 calls. Our roadmap, so the roadmap today is an update of this roadmap, which extended the scope of the previous roadmap. So meaning not only the integration of renewables, but also the integration of all flexibilities. So you can have flexibilities from renewable generation, but also from storage, which was the focus, and from the network, from active demand, and so on. And we also had the assignment to link with the other energy networks, meaning gas and heat grids. The main point in terms of stakeholder consultation was the merging of this EEGI and another technology platform, which was Gathering Research Institute, under the umbrella of what is called today the ETIPSnet. So it is the European Technology and Innovation Platform for smart networks for the energy transition, meaning that today the European Commission has succeeded in gathering under the same umbrella all the stakeholders of the energy system, which is quite convenient when you do consultations. Just for your information, there is a new roadmap which will be published in 3 to 4 years from now, which addresses the energy system as a whole. It is a new project, and my company is a member of this project. Just to clarify what we mean with flexibility, so in our exercise, the electricity network is the backbone of the energy system. So there is flexibility at grid level. So you can have flexibility with, for example, phase shifters in the electricity grids, or FACS, flexible AC transmission devices. You can have flexibility from demand. You can modulate demand. You have flexibility from generation, of course, flexibility from energy storage, flexibility from the interaction with other energy networks, and flexibility provided by information and communication technologies. So that's the flexibilities we address in this road mapping exercise. Let's go to the monitoring and consultation process. So just a few words to tell you that to build this roadmap, we did many consultations, so through the ETIPSnet and also through regional workshops. So the purpose of these regional workshops was to make sure that not only we consulted players at European level, but also at member state level. So we had the assignment to hear about what was done in each member state, meaning that the European Commission wanted to make sure that double funding was avoided, meaning that we would not specify R&I activities which were already covered in some European countries. We also did an extensive monitoring, meaning we scanned projects, both in European projects, national projects in European countries and at international level, so as to make sure that we would not specify R&I activities in the roadmap that were already covered by research institute at national or international level. the main inputs that we gathered from these regional workshops, two main messages for socio-economics was this number 2, multi-service business model. So for storage, today in Europe, there is no business case for storage operators relying on a single service, for example, frequency containment reserves. So this is an important point, and which has been stressed, and which is dealt with actually in the new energy package. Another point was point number 4, market players. So they made clear that they lacked a clear regulatory framework. And the most interesting point, at least according to me, was point number 5, which is a regulatory issue. It's about ownership of storage devices and operation. So in Europe, some of the network operators, they want to own and operate storage devices, and they have entered into, I would say, a fight with market players, which do not see it this way. They want to own and operate and provide, of course, services to the regulated players. So this is also something which is dealt with in the new energy package. Let's go to the roadmap structure. So this is just one slide to explain quickly that the roadmap is really mapping the energy policies. So what we did when we built this roadmap, so for those of you that will read the roadmap, we looked at the energy union policies and we made a forecast of the most probable evolutions of the power systems. From this evolution, so that's block 2, we deducted the future challenges for the stakeholders of the power system, and this allowed us from these future challenges, block 3, to map the knowledge domain into a 3-like structure with clusters and functional objectives. So we'll see shortly what the clusters are. So what are these clusters? So let's look at the right-hand side of the screen. So this is the clusters for the distribution system, so the challenges. So we have 6 different groups. So upgrading of the network, it means how to better operate the network with the existing asset. Power system reliability, power system flexibility, so how to have a system which is more reliable and flexible. ICT and digitalization, so try to find flexibility with ICT and digitalization. Market design and regulatory environment. So we will focus on these 2 last challenges, these 2 last clusters. So let's go to some examples of RNI activities which are specified in the roadmap, which are of high importance for the future of the European power system, and especially distribution grids. The first one is active demand response. So active demand response is implemented in many electric systems in Europe, especially at transmission level, with big industrial customers. So people or industries that are connected at transmission level. There is still a major challenge to have massive active demand response from end users. So we can take, for example, this activity number 3, so to study the rebound and deferral effects and provide reliable models to predict them, so as to provide DSOs with methods to anticipate the impacts on the network operations. So this is something which is a major issue. Today, some operators are reluctant to rely on active demand response from end users because there is a high uncertainty which is related to it. So there is a strong need from social sciences to understand what we call rebound effects, meaning that people could participate in active demand response schemes one day, and the other day they would not participate when you most need it in the system. From the regulatory point of view, there are still barriers in Europe, in most European countries, so as to have schemes which allow an aggregator, or I would say a market player, to bid on the wholesale market with a portfolio of, let's say, 10,000 end users. So this is still something which has to be fixed. Next point, which is interesting, is the integration of energy efficiency. So these smart homes and smart buildings. Today there is a major issue, that's point number 3, for instance, on customer acceptance and involvement in these energy efficiency schemes. So we are really in social sciences, as Klaus was saying. So we have to work on ergonomics, on market, on price signals, and behavior. We go back to these rebound effects, so as to make sure that we can make European customers participate in energy efficiency schemes. So for the regulated players, there is a major issue, is that we tell these guys that they have to sell more or less less electricity. For them, there is a need for a clear regulatory framework, so as they can make sure that they will still make money, they will still make a living, even if the electricity consumption goes down or decreases as the result of strong energy efficiency policies. Another interesting point, which is a major issue right now, which is a hot potato, but which is also dealt with in the new energy package, this fourth energy package that was published in 2016, is how to use renewables, especially at low voltage level PV, to have ancillary services. PV not only from, I would say, generators, but for example from prosumers. So we are in the same scheme as for active demand. We want end users, so prosumers, to participate in producing electricity with the PV roofs, to participate in energy markets. So this is still something which is under evaluation and which is also dealt with in the directive. For the DSO, so there is a major issue on how to interact with these prosumers, because DSO wants to know what is going on their network, and this is also something which has to be dwelt upon. The second point, so the regulatory framework for temporary use of distributed DR, so distributed energy resources for grid management purposes. So this is really something which is also discussed. So some network operators would like to have in emergency situation the possibility to take over some generation unit, non-dispatchable generation units. And this is something that is discussed also. And it would take some time, I would say, to have a clear regulatory framework. So it needs research work. For the system integration of what he calls medium DER, so it is the same. So it's at medium voltage level. So here I would say that the landscape maybe is clearer, because most of the big distribution system operators in Europe, they have equipped their grids already with monitoring and control devices, which allow them to host more renewables and to procure this type of services. So the main issue in terms of regulatory problems is network codes which have to be defined. So today in Europe there are network codes for transmission, but not for distribution. So which is something which has to be fixed also. For the integration of storage, I would say that today the main issue is really to have the tools to simulate and to value storage in an integrated point of view, so in the energy system. And from the regulatory point of view, so we already spoke about it, so there is a major issue to know how to, I would say, to share ownership and operation of storage devices between market players and here DSO, so regulated players. So this is something actually which is clearly mentioned in the new recast of the directive, so this fourth energy package. Let's continue with another important point. So for distribution grids, it is the electrification of transport. So in terms of market design, there is a strong need to find the right incentives to encourage electric vehicle users to provide services through vehicle-to-grid applications. So this is something which is experimented in some countries. For example, in the country of Klaus, in Austria, I think they have already experimented quite far, but still it lacks a regulatory environment at European level. So this is also something to be dealt with. Let's finish with the integration with other energy networks. So the coupling between energy networks, especially at a distribution level. So for Europe, it would mean how to couple electricity and heat is also still something which has to be understood, and there is need for a simulation for market design to understand what is the added value of this coupling. Today, in terms of regulation, so I put none because the regulation is far from being clear, and there are no specific activities foreseen. Let's conclude. We presented a roadmap, and this roadmap has allowed, so it was a step forward because it has allowed all energy stakeholders, so not only the electricity power system, so the power system stakeholders to participate, but all the energy stakeholders from the energy system in Europe. And we were able to enlarge the scope to all flexibility means. So we were able in this roadmap to consider at the same time, but with an emphasis on storage, all means that can provide the necessary flexibility for the power system so as to operate with very high shares of renewable energies, so non-dispatchable renewable energy sources. In terms of research and activities related to energy storage, which was the main focus of this roadmap, we draw two main conclusions regarding socio-economic. So the first one is about the regulatory frameworks and the market mechanisms which are needed to speed up the integration of storage in the power system, and of course storage investments from market players. And from regulated players, there is still a major issue on how they could own and operate storage devices, let's say electrochemical devices, to provide ancillary services. So let's say to provide frequency containment reserves and frequency restoration reserve, for instance. So I would end by saying that this is something which is dealt with, which is proposed actually in the existing directive, the recast of the directive, which has to be adopted by the member states, and I'm pretty sure it is going to be discussed for a while. I thank you for your attention. So just some more information. It is about the ETIPSNet roadmap, so you can download it at the link which is here on the slide. And the last link, the Grid Innovation Online, I encourage you to visit this website, which is a database which contains all, I'm sorry, you got me, so this database contains all the projects which were scanned. So if you want to have an idea of what's going on in Europe in terms of research, here we'll find all projects and the different research activities, the different research results of these projects. Thank you for your attention. I'm done.
Okay, thank you, Eric. After we have heard about the European level definition of research needs, let's come to a national SRA process example for research for research organizations and universities as a focus. Yeah, before starting, maybe Eric also mentioned some specificities of Austria. Let me add, apart from this federal state issue with mixed large and small energy companies, distribution system operators, providers, etc., we have quite a complex issue. With respect to the situation of the integration of renewable energy sources, we have quite different constellations in the western part of Austria and in the eastern part of Austria. In the western part, it's mainly small-scale hydropower and we have large capacities for storage there, for hydro storage as well. In the east, we have wind and PV, and in one province we even have a net energy production of one of the provinces, so they can also feed into the larger grid of other provinces and into the transmission grid. Given this complexity of Europe and also of national federal states, for countries with such federal state structures, this agenda setting process can be of interest when you have to deal with complex coordination processes and to get innovation processes going, which are necessary for the smart grid transition. In the following presentation, you will hear about the goals and embedding of the strategic research agenda process, the participatory process leading to the final document, the content of the SRA, and at the end of the presentation, I will tell you more about the impact of the SRA that it had on policy making at national level and also at other levels, and concluding with the main learning experiences we can derive from that. The goal of the Intelligent Energy System SRA is closely related to energy policy goals as well as to energy research and innovation policy goals. In Austria, this is also handled by different ministries. So on the one side, of course, there is security of supply and the provision of energy infrastructure as public services as the main goal. There is the new focus on the integration of renewable energy sources compared to earlier strategy processes, and there's also the need to guarantee resilience of infrastructure systems in the light of the integration of these renewable resources and challenges related to digitalization of the energy grid. From the point of view of energy research and innovation policy, the owners of the process in Austria, the BMFIT, the Ministry for Transport, Innovation, Technology, is in charge of that, is also to have a long-term research agenda as part of Smart Grid 2.0 strategy. I'll come to that later. It's also important to have an international embedding of the Austrian research into the European research area on the one side, but also into international research. And of course, the competitiveness of Austrian industry is also an important issue. This slide, unfortunately only in German, it shows you where the strategic research agenda process was embedded. There were 3 processes in parallel. There was technology roadmap process going on with a time horizon of 2020, which was similar to the process that Eric was describing at the European level, and there were some workshops on current issues apart from our workshops that we held. This fed into the smart grid strategy, and this smart grid strategy then fed into the energy research strategy of Austria, which was just published last week. Now let me come to the participatory process. We did this as a foresight process mainly. We used the foresight methodologies, and maybe let me first give you a definition for those of you who might not be familiar with this concept and with this method, a definition of the high-level expert group on foresight for Europe from the year 2002. There they have defined that foresight can be seen as a systematic, participatory, future intelligence gathering and medium to long-term vision building process aimed at present-day decisions and mobilizing joint actions. So in that sense, it's well fit to be used for these kind of processes, be it visioning, action planning, road mapping, whatever. In this process, we used foresight scenario building, envisioning. The time horizon for the SRA for planning of research is 2035, so longer than the other most other research agendas, and the time horizon for scenario building, envisioning for the exploratory scenarios was 2050, because in infrastructure systems we have this kind of long-term horizons to be considered. The participation aspect was that we invited stakeholders. It was a deliberative process, so they were really involved in defining the issues, but it's also important to note that these kind of activities are also part of networking, building new networks between stakeholders who previously haven't been talking to each other, and it's also a kind of coordination mechanism. Involved stakeholders were coming from research community, also as the main addressee, then or the main actor in this field, then doing the research that's defined by the SRA, research organizations and universities. We had stakeholders from innovative industry, both from engineering in electrical engineering as well as mechanical engineering and thermodynamics, of course, and from ICT. We also had policymakers from funding agencies and from city administration. We had stakeholders from energy providers, both from urban as well as rural energy providers in mixed production, and also interest group representative only talking for the renewables energy providers. And finally, last but not least, we also had the grid operators. They are both from urban as well as rural areas, from electricity, gas, heat and cold. So all together, these were more than 40 stakeholders that were involved. The steps in the process, which started in October 2013 to April 2016, were that first we started with the screening of energy-related foresights, international roadmap processes in desk research. We developed a briefing paper on that, which was the basis for the first stakeholder workshop, the big picture workshop, which took place at the end of 2013 with 23 stakeholders. There we developed, out of these inputs, developed storylines for scenario building, and after that these scenarios were consolidated in desk research and fed into the second workshop, which took place in February 2014, with 20 stakeholders involved. There we developed a vision for 2015 from different perspectives, from production, grid and user perspective. And we identified the critical success factors to achieve such visions. From that inputs, the consolidation of research teams was done in desk research and also in relation to international activities, research activities, so looking into what's going around in other countries. The final stakeholder consultation workshop then took place in November with approximately 40 stakeholders. It was a final consultation process, and also there were written inputs to the final version of the strategic research agenda, which was published then nearly 1 year ago. Now coming to the content of the SRA, first of all, you can download this SRA from the link given below. Unfortunately, it's only in German, but modern translation programs can do quite a good job in that, so you get a glimpse of it, and you also have this presentation. I already mentioned the exploratory scenarios for 2050. The main dimensions there around which this was developed was, first of all, that we have different situations in rural and urban areas, and we have different foci or different attitudes towards the future of energy systems, coming from, on the one side, more centralized, and on the other side, a decentralized system. For that, we developed 4 scenarios as a basis for the further work. One was on sustainability in a decentralized energy system for a local grid. The other one was sustainability in an internationally integrated transmission grid. And the third scenario was a laissez-faire or business as usual scenario, assuming a climate policy failure. So what if climate policy measures failed, which we don't hope, but this is also important to learn about the critical issues, obviously. And also to learn about the critical issues, we had a breakdown scenario where no energy strategy is available, no transition pathways are clear for the stakeholders, for the actors, and there is a policy failure. This led to a vision and the identification of the critical success factors from the point of view of producers, grid operators, and users, as I already mentioned. And here you have the formulation, what came out of the process in the form of a small text, but there was graphics drawn by the stakeholders, which are also documented. The message of the stakeholder, apart from of what you can read here, was also to the scientific community that there is a danger of researchers remaining in their ivory tower. And we took that seriously, given that we had valuable inputs from the stakeholders. So from this vision, critical success factors were identified and led to the research topics. On the left side, you see our starting hypothesis on how we thought that that the stakeholders would agree that we should structure this SRA. It was disciplinary silos, more focus of electricity grid and engineering issues, ICT infrastructure, engineering issues, grids for gas, heating and cooling as well, strongly energy related research issues, as well as for mobility infrastructure, and then there was a separate silo for societal aspects and for urban regions, like smart city, relation of smart grid and smart city. It turned out, taking the advice of the stakeholders, that we have to turn to a transdisciplinary approach to research on these critical success factors. So the structure changed towards structure of infrastructure development, governance of energy transition, electricity-related issues, district heating and cooling grid, microgrids and gas grids, and also integrated research areas. I will briefly go through this, coming to nearly to the last part of the presentation. This graphic, it acknowledges that the SRA has to be continuously updated, and the themes of the SRA co-evolve with evolutionary and disruptive technological developments. So there has to be, like, not only after 10 years to do the next adaptation, but that there need to be a continuous adaptation and the awareness that there can be disruptive technologies. Now let's briefly go through the research topics. This already shows that these topics are a mix of socio-economic issues and engineering issues. Let me just pick out the first one, and that came out in very many aspects, that we need a definition and clarification of the strategic framework conditions for electricity grids of the future. So technology is not so much the problem, and that was, at least for me, surprising. So technology is not the big issue as long as we don't know where to go. Technology doesn't help us, but it's there. With respect to the district heating, there it's also the same issue, point 3, the definition and clarification of the strategic framework for the future of heating, cooling grids and gas grids. And also when it comes to this cross-domain infrastructure development, this is obviously also an issue regarding hybrid grids. This was also or is a big issue in Austria. If you want to have this integration of renewable energy sources, we need to have some hybrid grid solutions, and our economic and organizational framework for grid is also one of the socio-economic research topics. Now let me come to what is maybe new compared to other strategic research agendas. We were not so much only focusing on markets and regulation, which is often the case, and this was also the case in the ETIP-SNET roadmap that Eric presented. But we took another approach, going one step further, that the governance of the energy sector is changing and has to be changed if we want to integrate renewable energy sources and if we are when facing the digitalization. So there need to be research on changing actor networks. There are incumbent actors, but we know that there also will be new actors emerging and have to emerge if we want to have an energy transition. We need new business models and market rules. There is a big a big question mark, and we have a lot of projects now where we look into business models. So far many business models either have failed or in the preparatory phase it turns out that it's not feasible. This relates to sometimes to storage aspects as well as to hybrid grid, etc. Of course, this is even worse when the market rules are not clear. Eric already mentioned the behavioral aspects. We want to highlight here and have highlighted that it's not only the individual behavior, but that there is also in sociology a big debate on social practice, so that behavior is not only determined by the individual, but by where and in which social practices this is embedded. This relates not only to the consumer, but to all grid users. This can be, and consumers are often seen as the end users, the households, but households can also be like not only consumers, but also feeding into the grid in the future. Of course, safety and security for industry and end users is a big issue there. And not only the governance of the energy sector as such has to be researched on, but also the multi-level governance issues. And what you've heard already now from Eric and on the European level and the Austrian level, we have so many different administrative levels, and we have stakeholders that have now much more to say than they might have had to say when our electricity grids were built 40, 50, 60 years ago. So it's much more complex, and the complexity of reconciliation of interests between levels and between incumbent and new actors is a big research question as well. And of course, the legal framework of the energy transition is also under debate, and things are already changing, but as also Eric noted, they're changing slowly in this governance, in this formal process of democratic legitimation. We also need new process for the integration of societal groups. Not everybody is integrated still. We have energy poverty issues, just to name one. And particularly in Europe and in many countries in Europe, data protection and privacy is a big issue here. The next point is the developing a transition pathway towards intelligent energy system, and we have I already mentioned this when I explained the research topics in district heating and electricity grid. What is important here is that there need to be an orchestrating of collective visions of the future of energy systems. This is not only a top-down issue, but there has to be a consensus generated, and there's probably a new role for governments to take this role of orchestrating. We also need to generate and provide open access to strategic knowledge. Those incumbent players, if they are needed for the energy transition, they need to be provided with strategic intelligence, which they might not have had so far. This is an important task. This also came from the stakeholders that we were talking to. And we obviously have to generate and understand societal acceptance for smart grid transition. The adaptation of visions throughout time is also a means of orchestration. Finally, we also looked into and asked for the RTI policy issues. We have seen that there is a need for reorientation in the RTI policy towards energy transition. We need more mission-oriented RTI policy making. It's also important to include technology assessment aspects, particularly with digitalization issues, safety, security issues. We need horizon scanning and foresight processes. It also turned out that there is a need for new instruments, for example, regulatory innovation zones, an instrument that hasn't been developed yet and which is just starting to be discussed. And there has to be a new weight on non-technological research. I think I will just only briefly go through these cross-cutting issues, information and communication technology, ICT safety security, concepts, security by design, data protection, privacy, consumer rights are the keywords here. And this is cross-cutting because it's not like the electricity grid and the gas grid as the hardware, but it goes into so many aspects of the energy transition that it's cross-cutting. And of course, energy storage, which was also already highlighted by Eric, but also power to X, power to gas, power to heat, etc. This integrated analysis and modeling is just starting and is very important. And of course, the energy efficiency issue, the local use of energy, of renewable energy, and the high efficient transmission infrastructure are still to be researched on. And particularly also, of course, the integration of the energy grids as such. Now, coming to the last two slides, what was the impact and what is the impact of the strategic research agenda process in Austria and maybe beyond Austria? One aspect I already mentioned, it's part of Smart Grid 2.0, the process that took place between 2013 and 16. It was contracted by BMFIT, the ministry responsible for energy research. And it also fed into the Smart Grid Technology Platform roadmap, which was done in parallel. And the SRA was a main input to the BMFIT energy R&I strategy that was developed in 2016 and 17 by BMFIT and the CLIAN, that's the Austrian Climate and Energy Fund. And this finally will lead to new topics for the Austrian Energy R&I funding programs, as well as for ERANET Smart Grid Plus, which is also one of the possibilities of transdisciplinary research programs in Europe. It's also used for national consultation processes when the countries are consulted by the European Commission, for example on Horizon 2020, where the countries think that there are research topics which are not only relevant for Austria but for other countries or for whole of Europe, then these topics also will feed into Horizon 2020, but also in the development of the new framework program FP9 that will come after Horizon 2020, which is now discussed. We also heard that it was an input to the ETIP-SNET R&I. It provided an input to this, as there was a local workshop in Austria, and it was possible also to give input on the SRA in this workshop. The SRA process is also helpful for other processes. For example, the Economic, Environmental and Social Impact Joint Program of the European Energy Research Alliance, which is also developing a strategic research agenda on social science humanities, has also taken up some of these aspects. Particularly the transition issue is raised there as well. And it's also likely that the process also provided input to strategies of research organizations and other stakeholders, other organizations. And last but not least, it will have an impact components of this will be taken into the white paper on the strategic research agenda for smart grid transition. Okay, so what were the main learnings to come to an end? The process showed that it's very important to go from a disciplinary focus towards inter- and transdisciplinary research. Stakeholders identified research needs regarding the governance beside government, so also other stakeholders requested for strategic intelligence information that is provided by research projects. There is need for long-term orientation and stakeholder deliberation in this process. There is a changing role of government and namely as driver of the transition process rather than top-down guiding and giving only regulatory frameworks. We are partly experienced the end of a technology push policy making towards RTI policy from a demand side perspective, which includes the users, not only the users, the households, but also industry, and which includes also new instruments like innovation-oriented public procurement processes. There need to be a focus on the user side of local grids, and which are not merely distribution grids anymore, as they are bidirectional and not hierarchically organized. And the consumers' energy management is important, the integration of local renewable energy sources, and the provision of storage, but not only storage, but also the conversion into other energy carriers is a strategy for the future. And last but not least, the lack of social science and humanities turned out to be a big issue. There is a need to move towards transdisciplinarity, towards capacity building, to learn how to collaborate, to think out of the box. And we face a substantial lack of funding of basic, applied and transdisciplinary research in the social science humanities as a basis for devising the policies, institutions, legislations and economic tools for sustainable energy transition with integrated energy grids as a goal. And mission innovation should also pay attention to this. This is probably the last, but maybe the most important message, that if energy research funding is doubled, then this should also apply to, at least apply to social science humanities in the same scale. So thank you for your attention. and I give back to Stephanie.
Great. Thank you so much, Klaus. I want to thank both you and Eric for the outstanding presentations. We're going to shift to a short Q&A section. We remind that the attendees, you can also submit your questions in the question pane, which is on the GoToWebinar toolbar. Feel free to type those in, and if we don't have a chance to get to all of your questions, we'll make sure to connect you with the panelists offline after the webinar. And we've had a question about where to find the presentations. You can see the link right on the screen now for cleanenergysolutions.org/training, and you'll be able to find the presentations and a recording there. Our first question is for, it is about how extensive were the metrics used to develop and assess the SRA roadmap by grid storage in Europe? For example, were the major details of the metrics left for utilities to decide on their own, or were they mandated? And Eric, or would you be willing to take that one first? Or Klaus, just a reminder, you're both on mute right now.
Sorry, Stephanie, could you just repeat the question, so just to make sure that I fully understood?
Of course. How extensive were the metrics to develop and assess the SRA roadmap by grid storage in Europe? For example, were the major details of the metrics left for utilities to decide on their own, or were they mandated?
Yeah, what is meant by the matrix? So I'm not sure I get it.
The metrics, the standards used for assessing the roadmap.
Okay.
Were utilities given freedom in that regard?
Okay. Yes, we were given total freedom. So if I understand well the word metrics, it means the metrics we use to assess what would be included in the roadmap. So maybe you refer to the monitoring process. So for the monitoring process, yes, we had a three-level metrics. So to measure the coverage of the research activities of the ongoing and the finished projects at the EU and national level. So what we did is that we interviewed project coordinators, technical directors of the project, or the people that were in charge of a specific result, to assess to what extent the specified R&I activities in the previous roadmap, but also in our roadmap, were covered. So it was a three-level matrix, and it was assessed together with the experts of the project. So it was low coverage, medium coverage, and high coverage. So what we did is that when we had a high coverage, when we assessed that projects covered well already, that they were already a research result that covered well the R&I topics that were specified by some of the stakeholders, we decided not to include them. So I hope this answers the question.
Great. Thank you. Our next question is about stakeholder engagement, and the attendee would like to know, what are the best delivery channels or platforms for SRA to collaborate with relevant stakeholders, especially mid to large organizations?
I'm not sure if I really understood well. I mean, basically what we did in the Austrian case, that we invited all stakeholders to take part in the process, at least all stakeholders that knew of the Smart Grid 2 process, and so everybody was invited. So there was the possibility for everybody to take part. What we did, we took care that from the different and most important stakeholder groups that we would have representatives. So we were also actively looking for stakeholders if we thought that they would be needed. Yeah. So there were both large and small scale companies were engaged in the process.
Great, and I think part of the question is just what methods did you use to engage the stakeholders? Was it just invitations, or were there any
Okay.
channels that you, yeah.
Okay, okay, yeah, that's what I try to explain in the different steps of the process. So we had two stakeholder workshops, dedicated stakeholder workshops. They were half day. They were intensive workshops in different working groups, working on all the issues. So that wasn't like we were presenting something, but we really got the input, and it was hard work for the stakeholders in these workshops. And the final stakeholder consultation workshop was obviously providing some like presentation of the draft SRA, and then this was discussed based on this. And then there was also the possibility for written comments on the SRA.
Great. And then along the lines of the stakeholders, did you face any particular problems when working with them?
I don't know. I mean, I can tell. Maybe Eric can also tell from their local workshops they had. But for us, I mean, we work with professional facilitation based on network and organization development knowledge. So we are preparing the workshops very well, several days of preparation. We try to give a lot of input, also like expert input, but we also consider the stakeholders as experts in their field. So I mean, in 90% of the foresight process that we are doing, we are not facing substantial problems, and stakeholders are quite satisfied with the outcomes, and they were in the Austrian case. So maybe Eric, you want to add something?
Yes, I can add something, Klaus. So for the European roadmap, it was a little bit more complicated for two main reasons. We had to deal with the member states, meaning that the roadmap had to be approved by the member states, and as we explained, so 27 European countries with different energy systems and sometimes different strategies, national strategies. And then we also had to try to synthesize and to consider at equal level the different lobbying forces, I would say, for each flexibility mean. So we had a strong lobbying from energy storage industry players. We had also a strong lobbying from thermal generation players. So I would say that were the two main difficulties. As far as the workshops were concerned, it was not a difficulty for us because it was a data gathering process. We were listening and just trying to understand what was going on at national level. But at the European level, yes, there is I mean, it is a challenge to make all member states agree on the common text, and then to find the right balance in terms of research and innovation activities between lobbying forces, which sometimes have opposite interests.
Wonderful. Thank you both so much. If anyone else has another question they'd like to ask, either Eric or Klaus, you can please type that in the question pane there, and we'll be sure to connect you offline. We are going to wrap up now, and thank you so much to the attendees and the panelists for participating in today's webinar. We really appreciate your time and hope in return that there were some valuable insights that you can take back to your ministries and organizations. We also invite you to inform your colleagues and those in your networks about the Solutions Center resources and services, including no-cost policy support through Ask an Expert. I invite you to check the Solutions Center website if you'd like to view the slides and listen to a recording of today's presentation, as well as any previously held webinars. Additionally, you'll find information on upcoming webinars and other training events. And we are also posting our webinar recordings to the Solutions Center YouTube channel, and please allow a few days for those to be posted. Finally, I would ask you please take a moment to complete a short survey that will appear as we conclude the webinar. Please enjoy the rest of your day, and we hope to see you again at future Clean Energy Solutions Center events. This concludes our webinar.